The singer's fans still flock here for a glimpse of their idol's refuge. Neverland remains empty and off-limits to visitors.
Everything here is Michael Jackson's?
Everything that you'll see.
Michael Jackson left behind so many personal possessions that they have filled 5 warehouses.
For nearly 2 decades, one part of Neverland Ranch remained sealed behind locked doors and unanswered questions. While the world continued debating Michael Jackson's legacy, a hidden warehouse and private garage, reportedly designed under his own direction, sat untouched, frozen in time. No visitors. No public tours. No explanations. Just silence. Then, after 17 years, those doors were finally opened. What was supposed to be a routine look inside a forgotten storage space quickly became something far more intriguing. People expected dust-covered memorabilia, abandoned furniture, and little more than relics from a bygone era. Instead, what emerged from inside reignited fascination with Neverland and raised fresh questions about the private world Michael Jackson left behind. Because Neverland was never an ordinary estate. Long after Michael's death, the ranch continued to exist like a time capsule, less a piece of property and more a preserved fragment of pop culture history. The rides may have stopped, the crowds may have disappeared, and the gates may have remained closed, but the mystery never truly faded. Then, in 2024, something unexpected happened. Film crews returned to Neverland to shoot scenes for the highly anticipated Michael Jackson biopic, bringing new attention to a place many believed had been permanently left in the past. As cameras rolled across the legendary grounds, interest in the ranch exploded once again. And with that renewed attention came a closer look at areas the public had never been allowed to see. What investigators, archivists, and insiders discovered inside the long-hidden warehouse would reveal a side of Michael Jackson's world that had remained buried for nearly 2 decades. And this was only the beginning.
One of the things that I discovered is that it was very hard to get a sense of who Michael Jackson was by the end of his life. Because under this siege of accusations and stardom, the real Michael Jackson kind of disappeared.
And 30 years of cars he never wanted to get rid of.
Are these all Michael's cars?
These are some of them.
Some of them?
Some of them.
To understand why these hidden areas attracted so much attention, you first have to understand what Neverland was at its peak. When Michael Jackson purchased the property in 1988, he transformed it into something far beyond a typical mansion. It wasn't just a home, and it wasn't simply an amusement park. It was a private world built around fantasy, escape, and the childhood Michael felt he never truly had.
As we enter the main foyer here in the main house at Neverland, this was a room where Michael Jackson would greet his closest friends, and it was a room filled with artwork. These walls had huge paintings on them, some depicting Michael Jackson in whimsical or magical situations. He also loved all kinds of art. There were statues everywhere. One of the statues that I was told was located right here was of a butler with a tray with cookies on it, so he would welcome people in that way. At the other end of the foyer down here, there was a huge clock, a 2-sided marble clock that was so heavy that workers had to come here to Neverland Ranch and actually reinforce the floor here so that that clock would not fall through to the basement below. We can take a couple of steps down into the main living room. This was filled with couches and chairs and rugs, and in this corner here there was a grand piano. On the top of the grand piano there were dozens of photographs, framed photographs of Michael and his family members and his friends, and they would just line the entire top of the piano.
Over the years, millions were poured into transforming Neverland into a world of its own, complete with rides, a private railway, a movie theater, and landscapes designed to blur the line between fantasy and reality. But behind the magic was an entire hidden infrastructure. Storage buildings, maintenance areas, and off-limit service spaces quietly kept the dream alive, operating far from the eyes of visitors and adding another layer to the mystery surrounding the estate.
Which is a huge kitchen. This is the size of Meredith's kitchen, but this is an eat-in kitchen. He had a round table over there by the window. He would eat breakfast and lunch over there, and then this is the main preparation kitchen area. Of course, he had a lot of people working for him, people who cooked for him, and stepping into Michael Jackson's private master bedroom suite. I just want to show you on the wall a security code panel so that Michael could push this to enter this area, or anyone else who would have access to this area would push this. Michael could find out who was coming to see him. He had one of those security peepholes in the door so he could tell who was knocking or who was delivering something. You step down. Michael Jackson had a 2-story bedroom. This is the main floor of it. This was the sitting area. It had couches and chairs.
But the magic visitors saw was only part of the story. Behind the attractions and carefully crafted experiences was a network of hidden buildings that kept Neverland running day after day. Warehouses and storage areas housed everything from ride components and vehicles to decorations and equipment used throughout the estate. Rarely seen by the public and largely forgotten over time, these off-limit spaces quietly became some of the most mysterious parts of Neverland.
The tour. Can we cut away of this?
Yeah.
Overall,
That's him as Peter Pan?
yes.
Okay, what do you have here, Karen?
And this is Michael's handwriting.
And how old was he when he wrote this?
He would have been 21.
Among the most fascinating discoveries was Michael Jackson's private garage, a place that seemed untouched by time. Inside sat a collection of Rolls-Royces, not merely as luxury vehicles, but as preserved pieces of a life frozen in place. Carefully maintained and rarely disturbed, they stood almost exactly where he had left them, creating the eerie feeling that their owner might return at any moment.
To show you something that I thought
She brought us over to
Said a
something
lot
that
about
she
Michael.
thought represented him
The things
and what
that
he
he
cared
felt
about
were
the
him.
most.
this is something that speaks to him, his love of kids, and this was a gift to him.
To MJ Love, E.T.?
Elizabeth Taylor.
Oh, whole carousel here?
No,
Just this one?
just this.
Clearly there was a big emphasis on children in Michael's life, and everyone who knew him talks a lot about the fact that Michael loved kids and that he was reliving the childhood that he never had.
This is a diorama that was at Neverland.
A diorama.
Yeah, that was built for him actually by
But the vehicles were only part of the story. Hidden alongside them were personal notebooks, handwritten materials, and private records that offered a rare glimpse into Michael Jackson's world away from the spotlight. These weren't items created for fans or the public. They were traces of his thoughts, plans, and daily life, preserved behind closed doors for years. And when the garage was finally opened, it felt less like a collection of belongings and more like stepping into a moment of time that had never fully moved on.
There's another Rolls Royce.
Yeah, well, there's a few.
Did he drive any of these?
Of a tour itinerary in 1979 that described his mission statement for what he wanted to become.
The document reads, MJ will be my new name. No more Michael Jackson. I want a whole new character, a whole new look. I should be a totally different person.
He talks about that he will need to study and look back on the whole world of entertainment. He really thought about the fact that he needed to change how people perceived him from his days on Motown and as a member.
Even today, Neverland remains difficult to define. It wasn't just a home, a theme park, or a memorial. It was a combination of all three. The hidden warehouses and off-limit storage areas reflected that complexity. Rarely seen by the public, these overlooked spaces played a crucial role behind the scenes, helping maintain the world Michael Jackson created and preserving the illusion that made Neverland unlike anywhere else.
These are his socks.
Look at that. I mean, those are his original socks. So these are his shoes.
These are actually shoes that he wore.
And he wore those with the socks.
This is his memories of performing Billie Jean on Motown 25. I got an incredible response, more than I imagined, standing ovation, but still I was disappointed that after the big spin, I didn't stay on my toes long enough. I remember him telling me the story afterwards. He goes, I wasn't on my toes long enough. What do you mean you weren't on your toes long enough? How would anybody know that?
But he knew it.
Michael Jackson's story didn't end with his death in 2009. If anything, his influence only grew stronger. While many artists fade from public attention over time, Michael's music, image, and legacy continued generating hundreds of millions of dollars long after he was gone. Decades later, he remains one of the highest-earning celebrities in the world. But that success raises an intriguing question. How did a man surrounded by both extraordinary fame and constant controversy become even more powerful after death than he was in life?
It's just unbelievable. Michael Jackson sells more tickets dead than most artists do alive.
That is absolutely true. Worldwide box office now is over $300 million. And Michael has almost 60 million Facebook friends. He's the biggest selling artist on iTunes. And he's sold approximately 50 million albums since he passed.
After Michael Jackson's death, the battle wasn't just about preserving a legacy, it was about protecting an empire. Estate executives moved quickly to secure his assets, honor the terms of his will, and prevent creditors from taking control of what he had spent a lifetime building. But almost immediately, legal challenges, family disputes, and competing claims began to emerge, turning the estate into a years-long struggle behind the scenes. And the stakes were enormous. This wasn't simply about property or personal belongings. It involved one of the most valuable collections of music rights, publishing assets, and royalty streams in the entertainment industry, making Michael's legacy worth far more than most people realized.
Just though the Michael Jackson that I knew was somebody I considered, a very honorable person.
John Branca chooses his words carefully. Another subject he doesn't like to discuss is Michael Jackson's family. Jackson's father and some of his siblings challenged Branca as executor and the validity of Jackson's will. But the California courts upheld the will and Branca's ability to carry out Michael Jackson's wishes.
There was a series of wills, and they were substantively almost identical.
In that 20% went to charity, 40% went to his children, and 40% went to his mother as long as she was alive, and on her death would go to the children. The basic principle never changed.
Never changed. The whole objective of Michael's estate plan is to take care of his mother during her lifetime and to accumulate the principal and the asset.
One of the smartest moves Michael Jackson ever made happened far from the stage. Years before his death, he quietly invested in music publishing rights, including the legendary ATV catalog that held a massive portion of the Beatles' song library. At the time, many questioned the decision. But over the years, that investment evolved into one of the most valuable assets in the music industry through a major partnership with Sony. What once seemed like a risky business gamble ultimately became the financial engine behind his estate, generating enormous revenue and helping ensure that Michael Jackson's legacy would continue thriving long after he was gone.
I've on occasion.
Late in his life, Michael Jackson financed much of his lifestyle by routinely borrowing against his assets. But it wasn't these personal belongings that he used as collateral. Although the copyright value of his own songs was worth well in excess of $100 million, the crown jewel of his investment strategy was his portfolio of other people's songs, especially those of the Beatles.
Tell me about the music catalog, the publishing catalog that you advised Michael to buy.
We started with the Sly and the Family Stone catalog. We bought some rock classics, People Get Ready by Curtis Mayfield, Dion the Belmonts' Runaround Sue, The Wanderer, When a Man Loves a Woman, Great Balls of Fire, Shake, Rattle, and Roll. But then one day I got the call that the Beatles catalog was for sale. It was called ATV Music. And it was as if we had hit the mother lode.
And you paid?
The price was $47.5 million. And we later merged it with Sony's music publishing company to create one of the biggest publishers in the world, Sony ATV Music, that the estate to this day owns 50% of.
And so how much is that worth today?
I wouldn't want to speculate about what it's worth, but
Come on, John. You didn't make all this money in this town without knowing what your investments are worth.
Well, it would be speculation at this point.
It's estimated to be worth like $1 billion.
Michael's half?
Yes.
Well, you never really know what something's worth until you go to sell it. And we are not sellers. We are not going to sell any asset.
But despite owning some of the most valuable assets in music, the estate was facing a serious crisis. At the time of Michael Jackson's death, hundreds of millions of dollars in debt were hanging over his empire. Without immediate action, there was a real risk that key assets could be lost. Estate executives were forced to move quickly, restructuring major deals and renegotiating music rights partnerships, particularly with Sony. It was a high-stakes effort that not only stabilized the estate but helped transform a financial emergency into one of the most successful legacy businesses in entertainment history.
It would have been so much bigger back then if him and Tommy weren't beefing,
But why were they beefing? Over him owning half the catalog?
I think there was just like, catalog discrepancies or whatever.
And I mean, you did a bunch of that album.
Yeah.
You did,
I did
Unbreakable,
like 6 or 7.
Heartbreaker, Invincible, Privacy Threatened.
Yeah.
It sells 6 times platinum worldwide, which is huge, but compared to his other albums, it didn't quite hit those heights. It wasn't a thriller. Or an off the wall. Was it a little disappointing for a Michael?
No, because what I do, I'm like you probably sit down and you do math, right? So when I do math and I say, okay, he had 1 video and he did 6 million. When you look at Thriller, he has 7 videos. So if Michael would have had his fair shake, because they went on not to promote. Like Michael had a vision. Like I was part of it. I remember him saying, "We're gonna come out with this first. And we're gonna shoot a short film with Threat, and we're gonna shoot a short film." Yeah, with Unbreakable, and I'm gonna have Biggie because I had the Biggie verse, and I'm gonna have Biggie in the video in a hologram type form. He had all his vision. So when I look at that, I'm like, yo, he didn't get a chance to promote because whatever business wasn't right at that time.
That deal proved to be far more than a financial transaction. At a time when the estate was under immense pressure, it provided the stability needed to protect Michael Jackson's most valuable assets. Without it, control of key music rights and intellectual property could have slipped away. Instead, the strategy transformed the estate from a struggling operation into a powerful long-term business, turning Michael's catalog into a revenue-generating legacy that continues to thrive decades later.
The will named Branca and John McClane, a longtime friend of Michael Jackson, as co-executors. Jackson's crippled image was not the only thing they had to contend with. At first glance, Michael Jackson left more debt than anything.
The day he died, Michael Jackson had about $500 million in debt.
Zach O'Malley Greenberg is a senior editor for Forbes magazine, and he's been covering the estate since Jackson's death.
How much did his lifestyle and his personality have to do with his debt?
He never stopped spending like it was the 1980s. We charted it on Forbes. I mean, he was making 50, 60, 80, over $100 million some of those years, and even into the 90s. But after the first allegations in 1993, he never toured in the U.S. again. He never got another endorsement deal in his lifetime.
The first allegations of child abuse?
In 1993, correct. He became in many ways radioactive to brands and to sorts of companies that would contribute to those massive paydays in the 80s, and the upkeep on a place like Neverland, the spending on antiques and so forth, and the maintenance of his entourage and all of that, really.
Then came an unexpected turning point. Shortly after Michael Jackson's death, This Is It was released using rehearsal footage from the comeback tour he never got the chance to perform. What was originally meant to be behind-the-scenes material quickly became a global phenomenon, drawing millions of viewers around the world. But its impact went far beyond the box office. For many people, it was a reminder of Michael at his best. Still creating, still performing, and still pushing himself as an artist. Almost overnight, the conversation began to shift. The focus moved away from controversy and back to the extraordinary talent that made him a global icon, reigniting demand for his music, his image, and the legacy he left behind.
You go to sell it, and we are not sellers. We are not going to sell any assets.
At the time of his death, Michael Jackson had borrowed $380 million against the value of the songs he owned. So the estate had to move quickly to avoid losing the songs to creditors.
John Branca sold future music rights to Sony for a reported $250 million. It was the biggest record deal in history.
As the years went on, another unexpected shift began to take place. The focus gradually moved away from the controversies that had once dominated headlines and back toward the music itself. Brands that had distanced themselves started returning. Streaming numbers climbed, and classic hits like Thriller, Billie Jean, and Beat It found new audiences across a new generation. For younger listeners, Michael Jackson wasn't a headline or a controversy. He was simply one of the greatest performers they had ever discovered. And as that renewed appreciation grew, so did the value of his legacy, allowing his music to reach more people than it had in years.
With Michael Jackson, once they saw the success of This Is It, and once they saw, Sony investing $250 million for that record deal, then you see Pepsi coming back and doing an endorsement with him. You see Cirque du Soleil coming in and doing the show. I think that those first couple deals proved that Michael Jackson was no longer radioactive.
So death erased all his sins, or even possible sins, or suggestion of sins?
I think his death caused people to remember him as he was in the Thriller years. You started to hear Billie Jean and Beat It and Thriller on the radio all the time. I think that transported people back to the mid-'80s when Michael Jackson was...
And perhaps that's what makes Michael Jackson's story so remarkable. Most legends fade with time, but his legacy seems to have grown even stronger. Decades after his death, his music continues to dominate. His name continues to generate enormous interest, and his influence remains woven into popular culture around the world. In many ways, Michael Jackson never truly became a figure of the past. Through his music, his achievements, and the legacy he left behind, he remains a constant presence. And that is why, even all these years later, the world is still talking about him as if he never really left.
In 2009.
He died in 2009, and he made...
It's in 4 years, roughly 4 years.
Over $600 million, and that's more than any single living artist has made over that period of time.
And he's not around to spend any other money.
So now we'd like to hear from you. What do you think was the most fascinating discovery inside Michael Jackson's secret warehouse? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden side of Neverland and Michael Jackson's legacy, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story.